Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for.
I don't root for anybody. I don't root for negativity. But I think it is very realistic at this point that North Carolina misses the NCAA tournament. I'm not saying it will happen. They did, to their credit, challenge themselves in the out-of-conference, but they could miss the tournament. They are very likely going to spend most of February on the bubble. And I don't want to put the cart before the horse. I'm not saying that I don't like Hubert Davis and I don't think he's a good coach. But you missed the tournament for a second time in 4 years. You're on the bubble for the third time in 4 years. I do think we have to kind of sort of talk about his future as the Carolina basketball coach, okay? So let's start with this game itself. First of all, debacle, if you're a North Carolina fan. Listen, I know Stanford is well coached. Kyle Smith came from Washington State. He took them to the tournament last year. But at the same time, Stanford came into this game on Saturday sitting at 11-6 overall, 3-3 in the ACC. They are far from a juggernaut. And this was a game that, in my opinion, it accentuated a lot of the concerns if you're a Carolina fan. The first one, it's kind of a new age concern, is the good news if you're a Carolina fan, you had won 4 straight games. In that stretch, you really went heavy on the 4-guard lineup with Ian Jackson, RJ Davis, Seth Trimble, and Elliot Cadeau. That's the positive. The negative is if you basically don't get a really good game from Ian Jackson and RJ Davis, you're not going to win or you are going to struggle. And that's the crazy part. Ian Jackson was playing like that lottery pick, top 10 pick that we all projected in the preseason. I think the stat was he was averaging like 24 points a game in his last 4 games coming into this one. Well, he struggled. It happens with freshmen. 6 points in this game total. RJ Davis does play well with 19 points. But it kind of shows you how narrow the margins are when both of those guys are not playing well. Beyond that, and this is the big picture issue that I know everybody has talked about with Carolina, but it's accurate. We've talked about it since the summer. And I try to be positive because I like this team on paper in the summer when we did our offseason grades, okay? But what did we say from the beginning? We said there is concern about size down low. They just missed on everybody. And we don't need to relitigate it, but they wanted Jonas Aidoo. They didn't get him. They wanted Cliff Omoyori. They didn't get him. So we could go on and on. It doesn't really matter at this point. But what does matter is that they missed on all these guys. They scrambled late, and they just don't have enough of an inside presence. Now, they've been able to get away with it at certain points. But now you look at this game. Maxime Renaud, okay, the kid from France, he's actually been very good throughout his career. Unfortunately, he plays for Stanford, so he probably doesn't get enough credit. But he finishes this game with 25 points and 13 rebounds, and you have no answer down low. And so this was a concern out of conference. This is a concern going forward. You just don't have enough size, and that is going to be a problem throughout the rest of ACC play. And speaking of the rest of ACC play, I think it's time to have a serious conversation about what is this team, who are they, and what is going to happen going forward with this program. Because you look at this team, first of all, 12-7 right now. Now, if you look at the losses, it's not terrible. And that was the benefit of the doubt that Carolina was getting over the course of the regular season. Is if you watched them in the non-con, they had no great wins. UCLA, the final non-conference game, basically, it wasn't the final one, but you get the point. That game was kind of the one that you said, okay, well, you know, this and that. As long as we just don't take bad losses, we'll be okay, because the losses were good. The losses were to Florida on a neutral. The loss was to Auburn in Hawaii. The losses were to who else? Alabama. Alabama at home. You don't want to lose at home, but Alabama's a really good team. And so a couple things have happened over the last couple of weeks that are kind of causes for concern going forward. First of all, that great out-of-conference win against UCLA, it ain't really so great anymore. Okay, have you seen what's going on at UCLA? They came into that game against Carolina 10-1. They left 10-2. Well, now they're 12-6 overall. Okay, UCLA is 12-6 overall. They are struggling like you know what in Big Ten play. Every time that Mick Cronin does a press conference, he's whining about something. And UCLA currently is sitting at 3-4 in league play. But again, since that Carolina game, they are 2-5 overall, and their schedule actually does get a little bit tougher going forward. They're at best a middle of the pack Big Ten team, maybe a bottom of the pack Big Ten team if things don't turn around. So your great win doesn't look so great anymore. And then I also think the gift and the curse of the ACC is outside of Carolina, nobody's very good in this. Or outside of Duke, nobody's very good in this league. And so if you don't beat Duke, it's a two-pronged thing. One, you just don't have a lot of chances to pick up great wins. Like I was even looking, like they play at Wake Forest on Tuesday night. Wake Forest on paper looks like a good team. 14-4 overall, 1 loss in ACC play. They beat Michigan in the non-con. Even if UNC wins that game, that's not a quad 1 win. That's actually a quad 2 win. If they lose it, it probably becomes a quad 1 loss because Wake Forest will move up in the standings. But it doesn't change the fact that that's the example of there's just not a lot of good wins to be had. And any loss is basically going to be a bad loss. That Stanford loss is a quad 3 loss right now. That is a really bad loss. We can criticize Arkansas up the yin-yang right now. Arkansas doesn't have a quad 3 loss. They don't have a quad 2 loss right now. And so with North Carolina, that is where the concern comes in of like, you're not going to have a lot of great opportunities to pick up great wins. And then the bigger concern is that any loss that you get is going to crush your resume. And so, yeah, if you go, 15-5 in the ACC, you should be fine with 2 of those losses to Duke, maybe 3 of them if you include a conference tournament. But the counter to that is if you basically lose to, and by the way, if you beat Duke, that's great. But the counter to that is if you basically lose to anybody else, you're going to be in kind of big trouble as far as the NCAA tournament is concerned. By the way, Louisville, who all of a sudden is a great team, you don't have them on the schedule. You lost to them once, you don't have them. Clemson will be a good win if you can get it. Pitt next week will be a good win if you can get it, but there's just not a lot of great opportunities. And if you lose any of those games, it's cause for concern. And so I think, listen, I'll just say this. I think it's a little early to have the Hubert Davis, what's his future conversation. But the counter to that is, what is his future? This is North Carolina. Okay, first of all, North Carolina, I'm sorry. I know the NIL stuff has been weird. We've talked about it with Caleb Wilson. I saw Caleb Wilson question in the comments. Maybe we get to that at the end. But, like, the truth is, you're Carolina. Like, the way that Duke is just destroying everybody in the league, that's who you're supposed to be. And so if I'm a Carolina fan, I'm sitting there saying, like, it's one thing if we're not good or if we're okay, if we're average. It's another thing if we're average in a mediocre ACC. And that's where the frustration comes in. That's where the concern comes in. I think that has to be where the questions about Hubert Davis's future come in. Because if you look at this team, if you look at the schedule, if you look at the resume, this team will almost certainly spend most of February very much on the bubble. Every win is not going to help them, and every loss is going to knock them down a peg. Now, they're comfortably in right now. Okay, I don't do bracketology in January, yet here we are doing bracketology in January. But they're probably going to spend most of February on the bubble. Guess what? That's kind of who they have been under Hubert Davis. 3 years ago, they went to a national championship game. But remember, they really got hot over the middle of February on. They were one of the best teams in college basketball from the middle of February on. But before that, they were on the bubble on the wrong side of the bubble. Year 2, he obviously misses an NCAA tournament as the team that started preseason number 1. You revamp last year. To his credit, they win the ACC. Like, I'm not on, like, the Hubert Davis is getting fired, but I am on the, like, at some point, you are what your record says you are. And this could be 3 out of 4 years where you are very much on the bubble in February, and that's not going to get it done at Carolina, especially in this era where there's no reason that you should be anything other than dominating a bad ACC. By the way, you can't blame anybody but yourself. This is year 4 now. All your guys, you got rid of the guys you don't want. You brought in the guys that you want. By the way, Louisville is running through this league with a first-year head coach right now outside of Duke. And so if you're Carolina, again, I don't think it is necessarily like super time to panic, but I will say it is not good. I don't want to put Hubert Davis on the hot seat, but it is not pretty. But it is ugly right now. Carolina fans are frustrated. They have the right to be.